We have started a sermon series on Proverbs, and Solomon the wise, who had 700 wives, always gets me. You know, you put 700 wives and the wise together, causes a problem, at least for me. The whole idea of Solomon is that we need to learn to make wise choices. We need to make right choices, and we need to make God's choices in our everyday lives. As I was preparing to talk today, this is not a subject that is easy to talk about. For young people, you might not get adultery. For old people, you might get it too much. But adultery is the lure of sexual sin outside of a marriage. It's as simple as that. Adultery is the lure of sexual sin outside of a marriage. So maybe for the young people, that is something that you need to think about. I don't think any of our young people are married, are they? No. See, if you watch TV, you'll know that sex sells. Right? You watch any TV show on any network, and there is what was I watching last night? I was watching the hockey game. No, I wasn't. I was watching Sportsnet. I was watching the highlights of the hockey game. He's a Canadians fan. I know, we feel sorry for him. But every second commercial was either about 50 Shades of Grey, or it was about something else with a half-clad woman selling toilet paper or whatever. Why is it that we as a society have to have these constant images blurring and blaring at us? I don't know if any of you have read any articles about 50 Shades of Grey, or if you've read the books, 50 Shades of Grey. Hope you haven't done that. It's not about love, I'll tell you that right now, because love is patient, love is kind, it does not envy, it does not boast, right? And that's not about that. See, sexual impurity or adultery is about one thing, it's about greed. It's about greed. If you've got a doe at home, is that what it said? A doe, a deer, a female deer. At home, why are you going out looking for others? Why are you out hunting another deer? You know, some of the shows that we watch on TV just cloud our mind and make us not understand what love really is. See, Solomon realized sexual sin and sexual desire and the evils of it. So there is 5, 6, 7, 8. Proverbs 5 through 8 are all about adultery. 4 chapters about staying where you belong. In Proverbs 6, he says something to this effect. This is from the Message. Can a man scoop fire into his lap without his clothes being burned? You want problems? Oh, you'll get problems, right? Bring some fire into your marriage. Bring some fire into your relationships. We don't get as created beings that we're created for one thing. We are created to worship God and to obey God's commands. That's what we are to do. Solomon is trying to tell the Israelite nation where this is obviously a big problem. I mean, he didn't just write 4 chapters because he had nothing to do that day. I mean, he had 700 wives. He had something to do. Could you imagine the list? Honey, do. I have a servant for that. 700. No, it just boggles the mind. Okay, you're thinking 700. I can see it. They're right there. You're thinking. It's Luke. He's going like 700. They're not all going to cook and clean for you like your mom. This whole idea of being married forever. I'm divorced. I was married for 10 years the first time. And she found another stag. Do you like that? Thank you. She found a boyfriend. And the absolute pain that happens when you bring fire into a relationship like that, it's unspeakable. It makes you do crazy things. It makes you think crazy thoughts. You know, in the workplace, when that coworker pays lots of attention to you. Or at the gas station, when the gas station attendant is flirty with you. I had a friend of mine, a very, very good friend of mine, who listened to the seductions of another woman. He was seduced by her to leave his marriage bed. And one day I was talking to him and I said, "What are you doing?" I was a corps officer in Stratford. And I said to him, I've known you all your life. I've known you and your wife since we were teenagers. You guys were in love when you were teenagers. But you see, what happened was the girl at the office would say to him, like, "Oh, you look really nice today." And he'd go home and his wife would say, "You wearing that again?" And then she'd go, "Geez, is that a new aftershave you're wearing?" And it was that innocent. And yet the door then was opened and he jumped. One day I decided I was going to go to the house of the woman that he had moved in with. And I knocked on the door and I asked for him by name. And then I grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and pulled him out. And drove him to his house. To his 2 young sons and his wife. I want to tell you that through lots of prayer and through lots of counseling, they're back together. They've been together for about the last 7 years. But there was a year when his kids were 3 and 7. He lost that year. And he lost their respect. And he's still fighting to get it back. See, it always looks greener on the other side of the fence. Guys, especially, right? But it's also greener over the septic tank. Did you know that? The grass is always greener over the septic tank. We all know what's in the septic tank, don't we? But that's what your life becomes when you allow sin, sexual sin, impurity into your heart. We know that men are sexual beings. We know that every 7 seconds they think about sex. I did it with the teens last night and I saw Jonathan. I hope there's another one. See, there's it again. Now, I'm only picking on Jonathan because he's 9'3" and he could pound me into the ground if he wanted to. He's a monster of a man. But the reality is that when you start to think about impure thoughts or sexual thoughts, that you need to do something about it. You need to have a mentor. You need to have somebody. Next Saturday morning, I've invited Leamington Corps to join us for men's breakfast, and it's Stan Burdett, who is probably the authority in the Salvation Army on sexual trafficking. He is the president of the founder of a group called Men Against Sexual Trafficking. And he understands where all of this stuff leads. He understands where pornography, how it leads to sexual impurity, how it leads to impure thoughts, how it leads to adultery, and how it harms families. Has anybody ever thought why the Salvation Army has got such this huge stance on pornography? Is because ultimately it affects your family. It affects your family. Men are driven by what they see. The eyes are the window to the soul. Did you know there was a statistic that a hotel in the States kept, and they kept adult viewing movies, who viewed them and when, and the most movies ever viewed was when there was a pastor's conference in the hotel. A pastor's conference. They had hockey teams and they had a pastor's conference. See, it's that quiet sin, right? It's that nobody has to know. It's just me and the computer. But it turns your heart. Last week we talked about guarding your heart. And we have to guard our hearts. What's wrong with just sneaking a peek? You know, the first time I saw Playboy magazine, I was 9 years old. 9. A friend of mine's father owned a variety store. 9. The New York Times says that 1 out of every 4 people view pornography online or have viewed at one time pornography online. A sin that is secret. You looked at the stats about what pornography does, the women that it affects, the families that are destroyed. Jesus says these words, I tell you, anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery in his heart. What do you think of that? We were saying that pirates must be adulterous thieves because they usually have one eye and a hook. So the hook they lost when they stole something, and the eye when they poked it out when they looked lustfully at another woman. Men, I get it, we're human. I am human. I know you're going to find this hard to believe, but I am human. You don't have to commit the act. You have to commit it in your heart. We're hunters. Men are hunters. We love to hunt. We're not happy with what we have, so we want to hunt for something else. And once the hunt is over, trust me, so is the excitement. It's because our spouse isn't attractive enough or sexy enough or romantic enough. They don't meet our unrealistic expectations. See, there is consequences for sin. And in Proverbs 5, 7-14, Solomon tells us the first thing in verse 9 is you lose your dignity. Think about my friend, and I think about his problem. And the dignity, his mother-in-law slapped him in the face in the middle of the street. You give away your strength, your honor, your dignity. People no longer respect you. And talk about trusting you. How does your spouse trust you? It affects your pocketbook, right? 700 wives, you would have a big pocketbook. But he also had 300 concubines because 700 women weren't enough. When you're unfaithful to your wife, you're unfaithful to everything else. See, it's not about being unfaithful to your wife. It's about being unfaithful to a God who loves you and who wants what is best for you. And I don't care if you're a Christian or not a Christian, that is the reality of adultery. You give up everything. Everything. It's what it is. Drink from your own well. When I was a kid, it used to be, make sure you don't dip your pen in another inkwell. Yes? Yeah. Yes, I'm old. We have to remain true to who we are. We have to remain true to the woman of our youth. Now, what if you're single? What about singleness? You know that it's a gift from God to devote yourself more fully to God. But for those who cannot, because a virgin calls them into marriage, it's a viable option. Do you know where that's found? 1 Corinthians, just before the love chapter. The Apostle Paul. If you can't stay pure, don't get married. So what he's saying is, for you people that aren't married, you better stay pure. No matter what the urges that you have as a young man, or a young woman, or an old man, or an old woman, you need to stay pure inside of marriage. See, when we get outside of God's protection, we are going to get burned. We are going to get burned. If you even play with it, if you even pretend, if you even just explore it, you'll get burned. See, God wants us to wise up about our sexuality. He does. He wants us to be in control of it. He warns us about the lure of sexual temptation. Not just in Proverbs, throughout the Bible. He wants us to enjoy it in the context of marriage, but he doesn't want it outside of the context of marriage. But see, society today tells us, well, what does that mean? Most of your friends, family don't have a clue what I'm talking about. They don't care. If it's good, do it. If it's fun, do it. Who cares about the consequences? The other day I was talking to somebody, they said to me, well, I'm just going to do what I'm going to do anyways, and I guess I'm going to hell. And it was just that. And I said, and you don't care? Well, I guess if there's a hell, I'm going there, eh? I said, why do you want to go there? Well, because I'm bad. So why don't you change? Well, I like my lifestyle. I like what I'm doing. It's good. It's fun. It's never too late to change the direction that you're going. It's never too late to change the path. I think often about the adulterous woman and Jesus, and I think about the stoning of the adulterous woman. Those without sin cast the first stone. But what does Jesus say to her? And I think this is where I wanted to conclude today, is I really want to talk about God's grace in circumstance. See, by law, she should have been stoned. By Jewish law, but who's going to stone her? The guys that were the adulterers with her? That kind of seems backwards, doesn't it? But Jesus says to her, get up. Get up and sin no more. He doesn't say, you know what? Actually, I think he says, they find you guilty, but I find no guilt in you. Get up and sin no more. See, there's grace. And between the black and white, there is grace. Maybe we should have a book called The 50 Shades of Grace. And what it looks like in our own lives and what God does in our lives with grace. I am a product of grace. My life has been transformed because of grace. Change your path. Change your path. And only you can do it. With the hope of the Spirit, with the hope of Jesus, with hope of some really good Christian friends, you can change the path in your life. But you have to want to change the path. My question to you today is, do you really want to change?